Here are your video notes for lesson 5.1. We are starting a new chapter, so I would recommend that you start a new piece of paper, label it chapter 5, and as I said, this is for lesson 5.1, which is about understanding angle relations. And angles occur all around you in the world, everywhere. This is going to give you some information that would allow you to understand how angles relate to one another. Let's first of all define for you what is an angle. And there's a symbol for angle that is simply a kind of a tilted in L shape that if we don't want to write out the whole word for angle, we commonly would just write this symbol. But an angle is simply put in geometry terms, it's two rays that have a common or shared endpoint. Now a ray is half of a line, and that means that a ray will go on forever in one direction. This would be the endpoint of that ray. Another ray would have the same endpoint here and go on forever in another direction, or it could go on in the same direction. It would just be an angle that it would have a measure of 0. And the measure of the angle is how big it opens up right in there. As far as how we name angles, a lot of times we would put on here a point, give it a capital letter, points get capital letters, give it a capital letter, and give it another point here. And then we could call this that it's angle A, B, C. And how we name those angles, it's like connect the dots. We would go from A to B to C. The order does matter. The middle letter that you see right here has to be the common or shared endpoint that you see right there. Oops, I took away my C. The other common way that you would see an angle get labeled too is they might put a number inside the angle as far as in the opening of this part right here where the angle opens up, and you could just call this angle 1. That's a little bit simpler way to name an angle. Now we're going to talk about 3 different types of angles. Should sound familiar to you. I don't think this will be the first time you've heard of them. We're going to talk about acute angles. We're going to talk about right angles. And we're going to talk about obtuse angles. And these are going to depend on how far the angles open up. Okay? A right angle is going to end up being one that you commonly see in a lot of places. It looks like that. And that is where this angle is a 90-degree angle. 90 degrees, once again, we're talking about how far it opens up. A common symbol you'll see in a 90-degree angle is a little square that's down there in that corner of it. Obtuse angles are angles that open up less than 90 degrees. So if we have this angle here, the other one's got to open up less than what the 90 degrees was. So if you want to get that written and then label less than 90 degrees. Obtuse angles, if we start off here with an angle side, the obtuse angle is going to open up, so it opens up past the 90 degrees, and that is greater than 90 degrees. I do have kind of a handy tool here that I can drag in and show you what I'm talking about. Here is a protractor tool. I have it set on the 90-degree angle, and if I move it so it's less than 90 degrees, you can see that the angle keeps going down to different sizes. When we get to here, it hits 0. We open it back up. These are all acute angles. When we get up here and we hit the 90-degree mark, we are looking at having the right angle again, and if we go over 90 degrees, all the angles that fall in this part would end up being obtuse angles. So I will slide my tool for measuring angles over to there, and we will go on defining things. Oh, by the way, a quick way to know how to, if it helps you understand acute angles and obtuse, to memorize it, I usually think of the word acute, the word cute is right there in it. You don't describe big things as cute usually. Usually you'd look at something like this and say, oh, this is a little angle, isn't he cute? Okay? Now that kid's going to get extra credit. Alright, moving forward and getting back to math. You also need to understand or know you have what's called a straight angle, which there's a ray going one way, there's its endpoint, and if the other ray goes exactly in the opposite direction, this is a straight angle. It looks like a straight line. And it is exactly a 180 degree angle. Okay? That is, and you can kind of recognize it, that if it opened up to here, it'd be a 90 degree angle, and it keeps going on, and it'd be another 90 degree angle. The two 90 degree angles together would add up to give you a 180 degree angle. Alright, from there we're going to talk about angle pairs. If I get going too fast for you, I'm trying to keep the length of the video short. Feel free to pause the video and catch up on writing down notes. But angle pairs, and there are 5 different kind of angle pairs that we will talk about. The first ones being complementary. And complementary angles are two angles that add up to 90 degrees. So if I have one angle here that opens up like that, and I have another angle here, and if you don't see the other angle, I'll change its color quick. This is another angle. The red angle and the blue angle would make a 90 degree angle when you combine them. And they don't have to be next to each other like this, they just so happen that they are. So the key thing is you should be able to recognize 90 degree angles as far as that's the 90 degree angle. The blue side, if we told you that this side was 50 degrees, we would hope that you could figure out and know how big is the other side in order for it to total 90. This side would have to be 40. And now the 40 degrees plus the 50 degrees adds up to a 90 degree angle, and that's what your complementary angles are. Another type would be supplementary angles. And supplementary angles are related to the straight angle that we see up above. These are two angles that add up to 180 degrees. So if we start off with the 180 degree angle again, and we put another line in, we will create two angles. I'll change the colors to red and blue again. Here's one of our angles, and our other angle that we have is right here. If the blue angle we told you was 130 degrees, the red angle would have to be what? So that total it would add up to 180. That would put another 50 degree angle over here on this side. Now 50 and 130 add up to 180. Alright, the last three to define for you. We are going to look at what you get as a result of two lines crossing. If you have two lines cross, you will create four angles. Let's label them 1, 2, 3, 4. And let's talk about now adjacent angles. Adjacent's a word that gets used not just in math and a lot of other places. You might know adjacent means somebody that's next to you or something that's next to something else. In geometry, the definition we're going to call it is that they are two angles with a common side. An example of this in what we have up above is angle 1 and angle 2 are adjacent because angles 1 and 2 share this right here as a common side. So really what it comes down to is you're looking at these two angles are right next to each other. 1 and 4 would be another example of adjacent angles. 2 and 3 would be another example. 3 and 4 would be another example of adjacent angles. And I'm going to get rid of that writing because if I leave it in, it's going to get confusing. Congruent angles. Congruent's a word that will get used to describe things a lot more than just angles. Okay, congruent angles are two angles that have the same measure. In other words, they're the same size. In the drawing that we have up here, an example of this would be angle 1 and angle 3. A common thing that'll get done to show two angles having the same being congruent is they'll put this in both angles and we could mark it off like that. You might notice that there's two other angles that have the same size. Angle 4 has the same size as angle 2 always when two lines cross. And the fact that these are congruent angles, we wanted to give them a special name in math. They get called vertical angles. And when you have vertical angles, they are the two non-adjacent angles that form when two lines cross. And the special thing about vertical angles is vertical angles are always going to be congruent. It got a little crowded down there at the bottom to write in that they're always going to be congruent. But with that done, that should conclude our video notes for today, and we will see you on Monday.